let's go through the quiz statistics as a way of reviewing the material and prepping for a redo on the quiz. First question here, not everybody, I've got a pretty large question pool, so not everybody will have seen all of these questions, but for those of you, then I'm going to hit all of the questions where there's a distinct gray, which tells us that some students are not getting, like right there. That's not good in my perspective, because we have more students getting it wrong than getting it right. So green is the percentage of people who get it right, gray is the ones who got it wrong. So I'm going to try and whip through these. I've got 15 that have this distortion in them that I want to get through. All right, so first of all, with the question of the Muslim one, even though most of you got it right, we'll just look at, here's one of the maps from Module 1, and you can see that in this set of maps, none of Northern Africa has traditional religion being practiced, and then in this more contemporary set of maps, you see the amount of Muslim and some minority Christian presentation. But Northern Africa, attached as it is, there's going to be the Suez Canal right there, right? And getting over to Egypt, attached as it is to the Middle East, has had the longest tradition of Christian missionaries, and Islam is the dominant religion. All right, so let's go down here. Scramble, the scramble for Africa question. Here we're going to go again to maps, Africa in 1884. Oh, I did have it up. All right, so the scramble for Africa, the Berlin Conference of 1884. When you have a look at this page, it tells you that in the second half of the 19th century, after more than 4 centuries of contact, so the question was asking you whether the Berlin Conference was an effect of early contact with African Americans. There are already 4 centuries of slavery and resource capture that have happened. And what the Europeans don't want to do anymore is fight each other in the heart of Africa. They want to cut up the pie, secure their market corners, corner the market wherever they can, and quit fighting with each other. So that was the right answer for this. And you want to know that by 1888, there have already been 4 centuries of contact. So 1888 is not early. It is the establishment of a dominant colonial conquest. All right, let's go back here. Methodology, you guys did great on. For the scar as religious, would Keller, common way of marking one's body in African traditional kinship systems, it's for people to undergo a ritual in which their skin is marked with incision, called cicatrization. Keller would interpret this cutting of the body to produce identifiable marks as, so when you hear cutting the body, you should be thinking border, boundary, surface. The cutting opens through, so now we have the crossing of a boundary, producing identifiable marks. Think of that, those marks are like landmarks. The skin becomes like a map surface. These marks start creating differences by which status, meaning, significance are conveyed. It's a communication of identity. So, and I've got a page of scarification. Now, I want to start by saying, when it comes to what we're doing in this course, I want you guys to be sophisticated readers of cross-cultural information. There is a history, a very problematic history, of white people putting black bodies on display. By the time of the Berlin Conference, there were plenty of people who had captured Africans, put them in cages, brought them to Europe, paraded them before kings, paraded them even at the World's Fair in 1900 as like in a zoo-like presentation of these exotic, primitive, so the notion of the European hierarchy and the racial supremacy was rife throughout the display of black bodies for white consumption, white curiosity, white knowledge, all of these kinds of things in a power imbalance and an exploitation that was not creating a relationship of mutual recognition. It was creating, you know, you had your box of butterflies and you'd pin them in there, and then you could have your cage with black people to look at as a curiosity. There is a terrible history behind this. So when I put up this page, I'm really concerned that I want to be part of a 21st century making ourselves human, which includes recognizing the power imbalance of past uses of representation. So in this course, we think work, power, embodied meanings, and have a look at then the skin as a surface where cultural work is being undertaken, that power relationships are being established as children and initiates are being moved into their adulthood through these rituals for which the community celebrates courage, and the community understands that this cicatrization is going to make you strong enough to get through the hardness of life, that life is difficult. We are very unsophisticated as a people in terms of breasts, right? We tend to put breasts in the category of booby. And so in using a page like this, I want us to understand we lack the sophistication of being able to just recognize breast as part of a people who know their bodies are on the land and moving across the land. And so this is not titillating. This is not pornography. This is the way the body is carried in a hot place amongst people who would respect, through the marks on that body, her status in the community. All right, so we can see extensive cicatrization happening in different kinds of styles through here. And I want you guys to be able to leave this class able to explain to your parents, explain to your kids, explain to your neighbors how they might understand this as a people who are deeply concerned with the proper raising of their children to understand that life is tough and that we will beautify and make status on our bodies that indicate our ultimate significance on the landscape. All right, now let's go back here. So, doing good. Inventory 2. So in the first inventory question, according to Chidester, one of the answers that a lot of you selected was an inventory of the elements of South African traditions will lead us to our best understanding of religion. And on page 4, we hear from him, this simple inventory of basic elements of African religion, however, is inadequate because it does not begin to suggest how these elements were related to each other's. Did these elements fit together in a coherent system? One way of organizing religious elements into a system has been to regard African religion as a set of symbolic maps. And even after he's done with maps, right, he goes on to say, but this also is not enough. We need to see how the relationships of power are at work on these maps. And that's when he moves through the hierarchies of the homestead, of the chiefdom, and of ritual specialists. So that's why the inventory is not the right answer there. Inventory 2, I think I want to look at that as well. With inventory 2, I want to demonstrate why I use some not questions. Not questions, I want my multiple choice questions to move you from data to critical thinking. Not questions allow me to provide quite a bit of information that in moving through it, I am hoping that the tumblers of understanding are rocking into place. So, Inventory 2 question was, Chidester develops a basic inventory with key elements of traditional religion in southern Africa that included the central role of the high god in daily practices. He tells us at the beginning of that inventory that while most traditions have, if not in general terms, all do have a high god, despite this belief in a high god, African religious belief and practices concentrated on the role of ancestors. So that answer, I understand why some of you chose that answer, but the high god is not central in daily practice. Ancestors are central in daily practice. You don't make offerings to high god. High god is too far away. You need intermediaries to do that. I understand that many of you got it, that high god is everywhere. I can word that question better. It's part of the reason we're redoing the test. So many of you got wrong the need for local temples in order to keep religion out of the homestead. There is nothing about African traditional religion that kept religion out of the homestead. The homestead is one of the 3 spheres of religion. In fact, you can call it the religion of the homestead. So that's an important place. There are offerings being made daily. There are altars within the house. There's beer being poured out to the ancestors regularly. So the answer there was none of the above. Here's homestead. Here's another not question. By using this not question, I get to feed you 3 of the truths about ATRs with 1 falsity, rather than feeding you 3 falsities with 1 truth. If I want you to learn a lot of good information, I can use a question that reinforces 3 truths of the tradition as part of an answer. That's why I use them. I realize as soon as there's a not in there, some of you could get confused because now you have a negative question. I will keep using not questions because I would rather have you reading 3 truths about the tradition and arriving at the one, recognizing the one in there that doesn't fit. So I bold not, I capitalize not. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm trying to give you 3 good doses of what homestead religion is so that we're learning the material as we go. So, and this comes directly from his article. The homestead was a place for being human. This is right. Out there, things start getting tough. But we make ourselves human here in this home, here in this family, here in this compound, with our relationship to our ancestors. That's how you be human. It was contrasted to the wild and dangerous external threats. So homesteads were crimes. That's a truth about it. What was not the case is that women's power was the most important due to their domestic roles, because he tells us there's a hierarchy within the homestead in which men have the most important role, even in the homestead. They have a priority. The other hierarchies in there are age, so that an older child will have more power in the homestead than a younger.